Then I shall say it once more, your grace, so that the physician may hear it too. Send him north in November, and you will bury him by Candlemas, and I will not pack his box. Leave my estate, said the Duke of Sallowfield. He heard the words come out of his own mouth in the tone his father had used, and could not call them back. There were 4 people in the room and a footman at the door, and a duke who withdraws an order in front of a footman is not a duke by Friday. Tamsin Locke did not argue. That was the thing he would think of afterward in the sleet on horseback, with his heart going like a hammer. She did not argue. She stood in the middle of his library in her gray nurse's gown with her hands folded at her waist, and she looked at him for a long moment with something in her face he could not read at all, and then she curtsied and said, "Very well, your grace," and went out and shut the door quietly. The physician, Dr. Farrant, permitted himself a small sound of satisfaction. Your grace has done the boy a service. 9 years of a woman's fussing. You will be silent, Rafe said, or you will follow her. Piers Sallow was 6 years old, the son of Rafe's dead brother, and heir to the dukedom of Sallowfield and everything in it. He had a weak chest, an alarming stock of information about beetles, and an unshakable belief that his uncle was the finest horseman in England. He had been born in the same week his mother's health broke, and he had been in Tamsin Locke's hands from that week to this. First as her mistress's maid, then as the boy's nurse. Then, after the wreck of the packet off, the Pellard Sands took both his parents on their way home from the south, as the only thing in the world that had not changed. Rafe had inherited the pair of them at 39, along with a title he had never wanted, and had done what he believed a guardian must. Dr. Farrant had come from town in September and been magnificent. He had pronounced the boy coddled and womanish, and endangered by exactly the sort of tenderness that ruins the constitution of a delicate male, and had recommended, in a written scheme of 11 articles, the Northern Academy at Codby. Cold rooms, sea bathing, no fires before December, no nurse, no visits until the spring. And the Duke of Sallowfield, reading it, had felt the ground come up under him with a horrible familiarity, because that was his own childhood on the page. He had been the frail one. Rafe, second son, wheezing, white-faced, sent north at 7 with a chest so tight the doctors gave him 3 winters at the outside. He had survived Codby. He had come back at 11 with lungs of leather, and a permanent settled conviction that softness kills and cold saves, because he was standing there breathing, and his gentle mother had wept for him and been wrong. His brother, the strong one, the loved one, had drowned at 34 in a calm sea 2 miles offshore. So he had signed the scheme of 11 articles. He was still sitting with it at 11 that night when he heard, distantly, a door, and thought nothing of it. At 6 in the morning, the housekeeper came into his dressing room without knocking, which she had not done in 9 years, and her face was the color of paper. Your Grace, the nursery is empty. His young lordship's bed has not been slept in since 2. The blue box is gone, and the boy's greatcoat, and the pattens, and the little chair blanket, and Miss Locke's box, and there is a letter on the schoolroom table addressed to your Grace in her hand. Rafe was down the stairs in his shirt-sleeves. Your Grace, you told me to leave your estate, and I have obeyed you. I have taken Piers with me, and I know exactly what that is, and I have no defense in law. I am going to his mother's aunt at Wren Abbas, which is 31 miles, and I shall write to you from there. If you send the constables, I shall not resist them. I shall come back and stand up before any magistrate you like and be committed, and I shall say the same thing to him that I said to you last night. But he will not be at Codby in November, and the 11 articles will not be begun on Monday. And if I must be taken up for a felon to prevent it, then That is a fair bargain, and I have made it with my eyes open. He has had a cough since Sunday. Dr. Farrant says it is nothing. It is not nothing. I have heard it before, and so has your Grace, in that same little chest in the same month. I have loved him since he was 4 days old. There is no one else in the world who remembers his mother's voice for him. Forgive me. Do not forgive me. Only do not send him north. T. Locke. Rafe read it once, and the world narrowed to a single point of light. The mail, he said. Which road, ma'am? The Wren Abba's road goes over Ladbroke Ford, your Grace, and the housekeeper's hands twisted in her apron, and the ford has been up since Tuesday. Hodge said last night it was over the marker stone, and it has been sleeting since 4. He was in the yard in 7 minutes. He sent a groom for the constable and another for the doctor and a third to the ford by the lower lane, and took the grey hunter himself, and rode out of the gates of Sallowfield at 6:20 in the morning, with the sleet coming sideways off the flats, and no coat worth the name. 31 miles on foot in November, with a box and a 6-year-old, and a cough that was not nothing. Every hoofbeat of the first 4 miles was his own voice saying, "Leave my estate." He found their track at the second milestone, a woman's prints and a child's, and the dragging line of a box carried by its rope, veering off the turnpike onto the drover's way. She had left the road, because the road went to the ford, and she had known the ford was up. He had not credited her with knowing. He had not credited her with anything. 9 years the woman had run his brother's nursery, and he could not have told you before that morning whether she could read. The drover's way went over the shoulder of the down and dropped into the withy beds. It was 2 miles longer, and it was, in sleet and dark, a great deal worse. He lost the trace twice. At the withy beds, the water was over the causeway, brown and moving, with the willow stumps standing out in it like teeth, and there was a shawl in the thorn on the far side. Rafe went into the water on foot with the reins over his arm, and it was to his thighs, and it pulled, and he thought with a coldness worse than the flood of how much a small boy weighs and how little. The shawl was hers. It was tied deliberately in a knot at the height of a man's eye. She had marked her way. She had gone up the withy bank toward the old lime kiln, and she had tied a shawl in a thorn where a rider coming after would see it, and he understood, standing waist-deep in a flooded causeway in the grey light, that Tamsin Lock had never once meant to disappear. The lime kiln at Sallow Bottom was a domed brick oven in the side of the hill, dead these 20 years, with a black mouth and a floor of old ash. Rafe put his head into it and could see nothing whatever, and said her name into the dark, and there was a long silence, and then a small voice said, "Uncle." The Duke of Sallowfield went down on his knees in the wet ash. She had got a fire going out of the old kiln brush. That was the first thing he saw when his eyes came round, a red handful of it in a hollow of the ash. She had built a wall of the blue box and her own pelisse and both their coats to keep the draught off, and she had the boy inside the shell of it against her, wrapped in the chair blanket and her petticoat and the flannel lining of her pelisse, with only her thin gown left to herself, so blue with cold that her jaw would not work properly. "He walked 8 miles, Tamsin said when she could. "He walked 8 miles, your Grace, and never once complained, and the water was over the causeway and I could not carry him across it, so I brought him up here and I tied my shawl where you would see it. I knew you would come. I have known you 9 years, and I knew you would come yourself and not send Hodge. Give him to me. His cough is much worse. I have been counting his breaths, and they are 42. Tamsin." His voice broke in the middle of her name, and he did not care who heard it, though there was nobody in the kiln but the 3 of them. "Give him to me." He carried the boy out of the kiln inside his own coat, and put him up on the grey, and walked at the head with Tamsin holding the child in the saddle. And it took them 2 hours and 10 minutes to come the 4 miles back to Sallowfield, and he did not once let go of the bridle. At the gates the constable was waiting with the groom, and Dr. Farrant beside him in a dry hat. "Your Grace," the constable said, "I am given to understand there has been an abduction of the heir." "You are given to understand wrong," said the Duke of Sallowfield. "Miss Locke removed my nephew from this house last night on my own express order, given in front of 4 witnesses, when I turned her out of doors at 11 o'clock at night without a carriage. Any felony committed at Sallowfield in the last 12 hours is mine. You may write that down and I will sign it." He turned. "Dr. Farrant, your account will be settled to the day, and the chaise is at your service within the hour. Your 11 articles are in the library fire, where they have been since 7 this morning. Get out of my way." Then he went indoors, and did the things he should have done in September. Fires in the nursery day and night. The old apothecary from the village, Mr. Meach, who had physicked 3 generations of Sallows, and who took one look at the boy, and said inflammation of the lungs and no time to lose. Steam kettles, a tent of blankets, the window shut and the room warm and the door watched. 3 days and 3 nights. Rafe sat on the far side of the bed in his shirt-sleeves through all of it, because Tamsin would not leave, and he found that he would not leave her. On the 2nd night, when the breaths were 350, and the boy did not know either of them, the Duke of Sallowfield told her about Codby. He told it badly. The dormitory of 11 beds with the ice on the inside of the panes, being taken down to the sea at 6 in the morning in February, and held under. The letters home that were read by a master before they were sealed, so that a boy of 7 learned to write "I am very well" and to mean nothing by it. And his mother's letters coming back, and being kept from him for his own good, and given to him in a bundle 4 years later, when he came home with lungs of leather, and nothing else whatever. "It cured me," he said. "That is the thing, Tamsin. It did cure me. I have not wheezed since I was 11. My mother wept and begged my father not to send me, and she was wrong and he was right, and I have believed for 30 years that the tenderness was the danger. I signed those articles because I thought I was doing for Piers the one hard kindness my father did for me." Tamsin wrung out the cloth and laid it on the boy's forehead, and did not look up. "It did not cure you," she said. "I am breathing." "You are breathing, and you cannot ask anybody for anything." Her voice was quite level, which made it worse. "Your Grace, I have watched you for 9 years. You sit in that library alone every evening of your life. You did not go to your own brother's house for 2 years because you could not bear to be in a warm room with people who loved each other. When your nephew runs at you in the hall, you put your hand out and stop him at arm's length every time, and he has never once minded, and I have minded very much. Codby did not make your lungs. It taught a boy of 7 that he might scream all night and nobody would come. That is what you were about to teach him, and it is not hardness. It is only grief, passed on because nobody stopped it." Rafe sat in the dark with the steam kettle hissing, and did not answer her for a long time. "Nobody came," he said at last. "No. You tied your shawl in the thorn because you knew I would." "I knew you would come yourself," Tamsin said, "and that you would come on the gray and not send Hodge, and that you would go into that water on foot rather than lose the trace. I have never once doubted what you are underneath. I only doubted whether you would find it out in time." The fever turned at 4 in the morning of the 4th day. By the 9th day the boy was sitting up demanding beetles, and by the 11th the Duke of Sallowfield was on the nursery floor in his good coat being made to look at a jar. Dr. Farrant wrote from town, as expected, to the trustees of the Sallowfield estate, a long letter about a guardian governed by a servant. Rafe answered it in the only way that could not be argued with. He brought down 3 physicians of standing at his own charge, separately, in the same week, and had each examine the boy and write his opinion. And all 3 said the same thing in different words, that the chest was inherited, that it would mend with years and warmth and would not survive a northern winter, and that whoever had been nursing the child had done it uncommonly well. He had the 3 opinions copied and sent to every trustee, and to Dr. Farrant, and to his cousin Osric, who had been making inquiries about the succession with more energy than tact, and who had the grace afterward to come and say so and to be forgiven. And then in December, when the house was quiet, Rafe did the hardest thing. He sent Tamsin away. He did it in the library, and he had it all written out beforehand because he did not trust himself. A character in his own hand, 4 pages of it, that any duchess in England would have engaged her on, her wages made up to a year and paid, and a pension of £80 settled on her for life, out of his own funds, irrevocably, whether she ever entered his service again or not. "You are dismissing me," she said, white to the lips. "I am freeing you," Rafe said. "Sit down, please. Tamsin, I have something to say, and I mean to say it in the right order for once in my life. For 9 years you have been in this house on £18 a year, and everything you have, your bed, your bread, the child you love, has depended entirely on my temper. I discovered on the 3rd of November what my temper is worth. I said 4 words at 11 o'clock at night, and you walked 31 miles in the sleet, because you had no other means on earth of resisting me. Your Grace. So, you are going to Wren Abbas, to the boy's grey-tan who has asked for you, on £80 a year of your own that I cannot stop. Peers will be brought to see you at Christmas. That is in the deed and not in my discretion. And in April, when you have had 5 months of not depending on me for a crust, I am going to come to Wren Abbas and ask you a question once, in a room with no child in it. If the answer is no, I shall not ask it twice, and the £80 stands, and you need never see me again." Tamsin Locke looked at him with the tears standing in her eyes and her chin absolutely level. "You might ask it now." "I might," said the Duke of Sallowfield, "and you would say yes to the man who holds the roof over your head and the boy in the nursery, and neither of us would ever know what you meant by it. I have taken 9 years of that woman's service for £18. I am not going to take her heart on the same terms." He went to Wren Abbas on the 14th of April, in a green spring, and found her in the walled garden tying up a wall pear, in a gown he had never seen, with the beginnings of an opinion about the vicar. He asked her in the middle of the path, with his hat in his hand. "I have been 5 months in an empty house," Rafe said, "and I have learned to let a small boy run at me and not stop him at arm's length, which took a good deal of practice, and I have found I cannot manage the other thing at all. Marry me, Tamsin. Not for him, he is provided for, and Mr. Meach says he will make old bones. For me, who was 7 years old in a room with the ice on the inside of the window, and learned that nobody comes, and who was wrong because you came, and you tied a shawl in a thorn tree so that I should be able to find the 2 of you in the dark." The answer took her some time, and was given largely without words, and the wall pear was not tied up that day at all. They were married at Sallowfield in June, and the boy carried the ring on a cushion and dropped it twice, and the parish talked for a season, and then discovered it had always been fond of Miss Locke. The grey shawl was found in the thorn at the Withy Beds by a hedger the following spring, stiff and colourless, and brought up to the house. The Duke of Sallowfield had it washed and folded, and kept it in a shallow case of glass on the wall of the library where he sat every evening, and in the years afterward, when a duchess in a warm room asked him why a great man should hang up an old woolen rag among the portraits, He always gave the same answer. "Because I once told the best woman in England to leave my estate," he said, "and she went, and took my heir into the sleet rather than let him be handled as I was handled, and she tied that in a thorn tree at the height of a rider's eye, so that I might have the chance to become a better man than my father. Every soul in this house owes something to that piece of wool. I owe it the whole of my life."